Okay, awesome. Can everyone hear me okay? Woohoo. So excited for today's micro learning. It's on Pivot Faster with Joelle Jarvis. And, right now, before we start, in the chat, if you can enter your name, your company if you'd like, or if you're in transition, let us know what field you're in, what you're looking for. You can also add what city you're from so that you can kind of connect with other folks who might be in your city. We usually have a global audience everywhere from Africa to Asia to Australia on down. And also feel free to add your LinkedIn profile if you want to kind of broaden your LinkedIn community there too. And there's also some folks who are watching this live stream. So if you're on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, we want you actually in the conversation as well. So tell us where you're from in the comments. Go into the comments and tell us name, company, city, where you're from, etc. If you want your LinkedIn profile, if you want to network with people. So today is a micro learning. It's a training and development that focuses on offering bite-sized information and small learning units with just the right amount of information to achieve a goal. So this is not a webinar where you passively listen to talking heads. We actually want you to immediately take 1, 2, 3 actions after we hang up. And it could be updating your profile. It could be making a plan for your next step on how you want to pivot. It could be reaching out to someone for advice in a new career. And as we are community focused, we want you to connect with 1, 2, 3 new people on this call to hold each other accountable, but also really to create community. So if you can, turn on your video because we want you in this conversation. We want to see your beautiful faces. And quick exercise, but I'm not going to actually record some of these answers on the live stream, so you don't have to worry about it. But if you want, top right-hand side, put this on gallery mode, so that you see everyone, and it should kind of look like a TikTok. Are you guys, if you're on gallery mode, you should probably see everyone. And I'm gonna ask you a few questions, and you're gonna rate yourself on this level from 1 being not so great to 10 being awesome, amazing, great, right? So for example, where are you on health? Okay. Where are you on relationships? Where are you on money? Where are you on career? Where are you on emotions? Where are you on self-improvement? Where are you on fun? Where are you on spirituality? Okay, so for next activity, top right-hand side, put this on speaker mode, so you should only see me. Oh, and also for the folks who are on watching live stream too, you can also just put the numbers in as well. So for the activity that we just did, I asked you to kind of rate yourself from 1 to 10. If you rated yourself from 4 to 7, those are areas where you're really average on, right? You're satisfied, it's okay. But it's really interesting if you kind of took a look at where you are. So for example, health, I might be a 7, right? Which is kind of average. So, where can I have improvement? If I was a 3 somewhere, let's say I was a 3 in terms of self-improvement, I would see that as an area where I can improve, right? And kind of ask yourself, if you were in a 1 or 3, which is, I really need some help in this area, ask yourself, what can I do to kind of move it up a notch or 2? If it's exercise, can I go walking an extra block each day? If you're already walking, let's say a mile, can I walk up to 1.5 miles? And then if it's other areas, like, let's say your competencies, right? I gave this example in my core community the other day. It's kind of my training group that I host. And we were talking about one of the competencies kind of being cooking. So cooking is something that I kind of don't like doing. And so I'm probably like a 4 or 5 on it. I need improvement. But here's the thing, I don't really want to change it. Because my husband cooks and he cooks really well. So even though it's something I need to improve, it's not something that's a priority for me. So when you kind of look at the 1 to 10 in those different areas, whether it's your health, your relationships, your fun, if you really see yourself lacking in it and you're at a 1 or 3 in any of those areas, it might be something where you want to reimagine and say, hey, can I pivot? Is this something that I can really focus on that can really make my life better? And we also have to be careful too about cognitive distortions. So for example, if you're a perfectionist and you aren't satisfied with anything on that list and you're number 1, 2, or 3 on all of them, it might be just how you're evaluating things. So it might be you're just a little bit too hard on yourself, right? So maybe you can kind of rate it more based on how you can improve from the year prior. So thank you guys for doing that activity. Today's talk is on pivoting faster with Joelle Jarvis. So what's a pivot and why is it important? A pivot is either a personal or professional change, and it's a fundamental change in your life strategy. You change your direction in life or your work, but you can still keep your life vision and your purpose, right? But it might just be changing your profession. It might be changing a relationship you might have, right? But the thing is that's important when you're kind of thinking about pivots. It's also kind of tied to feeling unstuck. How many of us kind of nod your head if has ever felt like where you felt stuck in life, right? Whether it's work, love, whatnot. By pivoting and if you keep on pivoting, even these small little incremental change, eventually you might be able to find that perfect fit for you, right? And that's how we get unstuck. However, it might get worse before it gets better. And here's the thing, few people in the world are lucky enough to find their perfect job or profession or the perfect mate right away. I know I didn't. I kissed a lot of frogs before I met my husband, right? And, that's a thing. You have to kind of experience sometimes what you don't want in order to find what you want. And that includes, work relations as well, and jobs and professions. So quick activity before I introduce Joelle Jarvis. In the comments right now, I want you to type this in. Don't press send until I tell you. Folks who are on live stream, do the same in the comments. Type it in, but don't press enter yet. Why do you think, what is the biggest deterrent from people being able to pivot in their lives? Whether it's career, personal, or relationship, starting a business, leaving a job, leaving a bad relationship. What's the biggest deterrent for people avoiding to pivot in their lives? So put it in the comments, and I'm going to count down, and we're going to press send at the same time. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Press send. Okay. Fear, major depression, fear of failing. I see a lot of fear, resistance to change. I think a majority of these are fear and uncertainty, mentality, right? The unknown. And I think looking at the LinkedIn page as well, we're getting kind of like that similar fear, anxiety, fear of the unknown. I think there's that common thread where people are afraid to change because they're just not sure what's at the end, right? But here's the thing. Think about love. Think about creativity. Think about fun. Think about innovation. All those good things take change. It's a little bit scary to fall in love, right? It's a little bit scary to try something new and to innovate. But all of the good things are really on the other side of fear, right? All of the good stuff. Everything you've wanted is on the other side of fear. So I am so excited to introduce my guest for today. And so Joelle Jarvis is a force behind Mindset Partnership, which specializes in programs for exceptional leaders. She's personally coached partners in some of the world's top venture capital and private equity firms with more than $250 billion of assets under management, as well as founders, top executives, family office executives, and entrepreneurs. Notably, Joelle was a master trainer and leadership faculty member for Tony Robbins and developed his on-site coaching program. She's a certified NLP and hypnotherapy master trainer, has completed extensive landmark training, and has real solid world credentials and business experience. Joelle's prior professional experience includes executive level sales and marketing roles at companies like Hilton Grand, David Sachs Productions, Chicken Soup for the Soul, which is where I met her, and most recently, Dibico Construction and Home Management, as well as other leadership consulting positions spanning 30 years, multiple countries across a wide variety of industries. So Joelle, welcome. So you, just from reading that, are the master of pivoting, going from Tony Robbins master trainer to executive sales and marketing roles, and now finding mindset partnership. What's the key to pivoting and why is it so important? Oh, and unmute yourself if you can.
I'm back. I was so impressed with all the things you said. I got excited. It's always funny to listening to someone talk about yourself, right? It's always weird kind of listening to everything and thinking about, wow, it's been a long time. You know, I think in large part, the whole secret to pivoting for people is, you know, a lot of what you said. It's not being stuck. For a lot of people, they get very caught up in thinking that their life needs to be a certain way. They need to have a certain thing. They need to accomplish a certain goal. They need to have a certain job or a certain relationship or a certain whatever. And they get very caught up in trying to get that thing. But even worse than that, they get very caught up in doing it a certain way. So for example, I'll give a really easy example. If I say, okay, I want to lose weight. They say, okay, the way I'm going to lose weight is I'm going to run every day. So I start running and I'm doing great. In the first week, I'm doing great. In the second week, I'm doing great. And then the third week, it snows. And I'm like, oh, I don't want to run. All of a sudden, I put it off for a day. I put it off for 2 days. Now I put it off for 3 days, right? And now I'm not running. But was my goal ever to run? No. My goal was to lose weight, to get in shape, to have great health, whatever it is. So the biggest secret to pivoting is really knowing what you want your life to be about. And being able to not be stuck in the how you're going to get there, but to really be focused on the what and the why. And that's really the biggest secret. And a lot of it you were sharing, like, you know, when you're making a change, whatever, it's not necessarily even making a big change to pivot. A lot of times it's the subtle changes. And I have a million things I could talk to you about just from the things that you brought up already. But I use the metaphor a lot about rock climbing. If anybody here has ever done a climbing wall, if you've ever taken your kids to do a climbing wall, your grandchildren, whatever, when you're standing at the bottom and you look up, you can kind of see where you think you're going to go, but you don't really know till you're on the wall. You can't really tell until you're on the wall. And then you may think, oh, that looks from the bottom, it looked like I was going to go that way. But then when you get there, you realize that that handhold really isn't the right one. And there's a better one, a different direction. You head that way. Pivoting often is just that subtle. It's keeping your eyes on the prize, knowing where you're headed, but being able to reach for the better hold to take the next best step. And so the pivot ranges for everybody, but the idea is always to be moving forward, always to be moving towards that vision, towards that life that you want to create.
I love that. And one of the things you often mention too is that, you know, you talk about resiliency and that it's emotional muscle, right? How's pivoting and resiliency tied together?
Well, you know, as we talked about this before, I read a lot of books, as I'm sure many of you do. And lately I've been reading The Untethered Soul, if any of you have read that book. And one of the things I love in that book is they talk about you can never solve a problem when you're in the energy of the problem. And resiliency and being able to get yourself back into a resourceful state gets you out of the energy of the problem. When you're out of the energy of the problem, you can be creative, you can be visionary, you can be compelling, you can be enrolling, you can be all those things that are required to pivot. When you're not resilient, when you're stuck in the energy of the problem, it's very difficult to make a change. And one of the things that Tony Robbins talks about is whenever you want to make a change in your life, you have to change one of two things. You either have to change your perception or you have to change your procedure. One of those two things. But it's really difficult to change what you're doing when you don't feel resourceful, when you don't feel energized, when you feel depleted or you feel beaten down by life or whatever the story is that we tell ourselves, right? So that resiliency really brings you to ground level so that you can come up with a new plan. And right. And so a lot of the work I do with my clients is how do you create resiliency? Just like the same way that you create a ritual or routine for your exercise or your eating, you got to create a ritual or routine for your mental and emotional fitness. Yeah. What is your morning routine every day? What are the things that you do that can change and interrupt your pattern if you are stuck or you're in a funk? What are some of those things that you can do that can get you to level ground? Because that's the most important thing to be able to pivot, is to be in a resourceful state.
So give us some actually practical tips on like morning routines at work and what folks who are on this call or watching on live stream can do to kind of immediately, impact and create change.
So I'll give you a quick little acronym that I use. I think is super helpful. And I'm a little corny, you guys, so I apologize. A little corny. The acronym is voila. And the voila stands for V, knowing your vision. And the vision can be your big life vision. Your vision can be what kind of day you want to have. Your vision can be how you want the meeting to go, right? So that's the V in voila. The O is the outcome. What is the outcome you want to accomplish in that meeting, in the day, in your life, in your week, with your kid, with your partner, whatever it is? That's the O. The I is the identity. Who do you need to be to get that outcome? Right? I need to be level-headed. I need to be grounded. I need to be confident. The key to the morning routine is to condition in those states of being for the identity and voila, so that you can show up ready for whatever life throws at you, which we'll talk about in a second. That's the I in identity. The L is the leverage. What's the reason? Why does this matter to you? Why is it worth it? We can teach somebody how to make great phone calls and make great cold calls. We can teach somebody how to be a great coder. But if they don't have the emotional muscle to get out of bed in the morning and to show up ready for work, or they don't have the emotional muscle to solve a problem or handle a conflict, it doesn't matter how much skills we throw on top of that. The underlying foundation isn't strong. So morning routine, voila. The L is for leverage and the A is for action. So whenever you're trying to figure out what to do next, you want a quick tip, do a quick voila in your head. What's my vision? What's the outcome I want to accomplish right now? What's my identity? Who do I need to be? What's my leverage? Why is this important? And what's an action I could take right now to get me closer to that? So that's a quick little acronym that you can use. As far as the morning routine goes, I use a morning routine to condition in the I and the voila, the identity. So for example, like right now I have a client who is a venture capital partner. But in venture capital, the most important thing in making investments is conviction, right? To have conviction, you've got to have confidence. You've got to be able to go to the investment committee and talk about what you want to invest in and why it's worthwhile and get people's buy-in. So you need to have confidence. So what I do in the morning routine for him is we picked out a song that makes him feel really strong, feel really confident. We come up with 3 memories that he can pull from the past of times he felt really confident, not just like an overarching time of life, but a specific incident so that he could drop back into that incident and feel those feelings of what it felt like, right? Like, those moments where you feel like you're in the zone, you could do anything. The more that you can connect to those moments every day, it allows you to start your day at a much higher level. So if you imagine every day you wake up in the morning and you wake up however you wake up, right? And then whatever life throws at you is the first thing you experience and you start your day. So let's say you wake up and you're here and then something happens that's negative and you drop down a little bit. And then something happens positive and you come up a little bit. If you have a solid morning routine, if every morning you take 5 or 10 minutes, move your body, do some breathing, put on some great music, think about how you want to show up and who you need to be, take positive action that day towards your goals. Then instead of starting your day off here, you're starting your day off up here. When you start your day off up here and something negative happens, maybe you come down a little bit, but you're still way above where you would have been if you hadn't preconditioned in that morning routine.
Awesome. It's kind of making me think a lot. Have you read this book called Miracle Morning? So it's by Hal Elrod, and I try to do it when I can, but it goes over 6 things: savers, silence, which is meditation; A, affirmations; V, visualization; E, exercise; R, reading; and S, scribing. And as I list that, I know folks are like, "Are you crazy? That's going to take hours." But you literally can do each one for like 5-10 minutes. So, for example, reading could be 1 page in a book. But that was really transformative for me. The hard part is waking up at 5 in the morning every day.
Well, that's hard too. Having bite-sized pieces that you can do throughout the day. And for some people, it might be reading. For some people, it might be watching a quick video. I mean, one of the great things about like TED Talks is they are short and you can get a quick dose of inspiration. Or a great show like, LeBron James has The Shop on HBO. Or you can go on YouTube and there's endless videos. Like Tony Robbins does a morning priming video that I really recommend to people, where you do breathing and you use your arms and it gets your lymph system moving, and it's awesome. And it's like 14 minutes. But again, everybody, like, different things resonate, right? Some people, they love being on the treadmill and saying their affirmations, doing their morning routine that way. Some people, it's just a matter of like getting out of bed and, doing some breathing. Some people, they want to do something more involved, and you have to change it up sometimes too. I made a commitment to myself. I wanted to get a new car, and I don't know how many of you guys have like negotiated with yourself, right? So I wanted to ride my Peloton, and I wasn't doing a very good job of exercising. So I made a deal with myself where I wasn't going to get a car until I did 120 days of Peloton out of 160 days. So obviously I kept having to push it out, right? But what ended up happening was I got really into it. I did my 120 days. I got to my thing. I did my car, and then I was burnt out and I needed to switch it up and do something different, right?
Wait, did you get the car?
I got my car, which is awesome. But now I'm doing different kinds of exercise. So, sometimes you have to change it up. The key thing is what I was talking about earlier, which is getting emotionally associated. Getting yourself to feel the feelings you want to feel. Affirmations are awesome if they're connected to a strong emotional anchor of that feeling. So I have a client who was going to do Shark Tank, and she got herself so pumped up for Shark Tank, right? She had music playing. She looked great. Her hair was done. She had the perfect outfit, right? Everything was awesome, right? So now she was so ready when she went out that she just kicked butt when she went out there, right? Mm-hmm. But now we call that state that she was in her Shark Tank state. So now whenever she knows she's going to get into that zone, she gets into Shark Tank state. She remembers what she felt like when she walked out on that stage and she felt like she owned it and she could do anything and everything flowed. And we all have moments like that for all the different emotional states that we need to access. Some of us need to access the high energy state. Some of us need to access a much more grounded, much more centered state. I have a lot of the guys that I work with that talk really fast and think really fast, and they're really smart. And their whole thing is they need to slow down, right? So everybody can find what it is that works for them. The important thing is to do something every day and to be consistent with what you're doing to get the benefit and make sure that you get that emotional connection so that you do build the emotional muscle. Tony Robbins used to always say, if you don't build your own emotional muscle, God will find ways to build it for you, and it's usually not pleasant. So it's better if you can build it yourself when nothing's wrong. Right? When everything's okay, that's the time to build it. If anybody follows boxing, right? If you ever listen to Oscar de la Hoya be interviewed, they asked him, you have such a heavy training schedule. What do you do when you're training for a fight? How do you change up your training schedule? What do you do differently? And he said, I don't. I'm always ready. Right? So that's what your morning routine is. Your morning routine is to always be ready for whatever shows up in your life so that you can pivot, right? It all is linked together. If you're in the resourceful emotional state, you're ahead of the game, right? You're prepared. When those opportunities come up to pivot, you're ready to make those changes. That's the power of the morning routine and building the emotional muscle.
You know what your Peloton example reminds me of? In the book by James Clear called Atomic Habits, he talks about the Seinfeld example, which is essentially this comic went up to Seinfeld and was like, how did you become the greatest comic alive, right? Because he's definitely by net worth one of the greatest comics alive, right? And then you think of Seinfeld fame. And he said, don't break the chain. And the guy was like, what do you mean don't break the chain? He was like, when I was first starting out, every day I would just tell myself, I need to write jokes or, whatever it is for 5 minutes.
Yeah.
And every day he would put an X on a calendar. And so his job was to not break the chain. And if he did like skip a day, he could never skip more than 2 days in a row. So that could be like exercise, or your example of the Peloton kind of thing, where you just don't break the chain on a calendar. So here's one of the greatest comedians alive saying, not about the technical skills of what you need to be a good comic, it was consistency. It was that every day, don't break the chain, right? So I think that's kind of the interesting thing, because we think of like excellence as being so difficult, right? But sometimes what it is, it's habits and your morning routines and these little things, right? So I want to go back to one thing. Earlier, you mentioned that you can't thrive, or you can't clearly, pivot when you are in the environment or the toxic culture or whatever it is of where you're at. So let's say someone is in a toxic job and they can't quit and leave, but they have to deal with a bad boss or a bad culture within this work, and they need the paycheck to pay for mortgages and braces and all this other stuff. How do you clear yourself mentally when you are already in that environment of negativity and you can't leave?
So I deal with this all the time. And here's what I say to people, whether it's a bad marriage, a bad work environment, whatever it is, it's always between you and you. We think it's about us and this other person. We think it's about the situation that we're in. We think it's about these other things, but it's always between us and us. We can be in a horrific situation and be having a great experience. We can be in a great situation and be having a terrible experience based on what we're focused on, the questions we ask ourselves, and what we choose to take away from it. What I always tell people is, if you're in a situation where you're in a toxic environment or in a disempowering situation, figure out what you need to do to be the best version of you. How can you be proud of yourself every night when you go to bed about how you showed up? Because when you start to make those changes in you, your experience of the situation becomes very different. Sometimes even the most perceived to be untenable situations can really become a laboratory for working on ourselves, figuring out how we can find ways to build emotional muscle, to communicate expectations differently, to have a different perspective. And the other thing too is, a lot of times the toxic situation that we're perceiving is toxic because of our part too, right? It's a toxic pattern. So we have a boss that acts a certain way. When they act that certain way, we respond a certain way. We've been having this dance go on back and forth for years, right? So the toxic pattern has become really ingrained in both of us. When one side of the chain breaks the pattern, the other side starts to lose energy. I have a couple that I work with, a husband and wife, and he has a very big personality. And whenever they have arguments, he gets very intense. His response is disproportionate to whatever the infraction is, if you guys know what I mean, right? His wife, initially, when he would have these outbursts and get very intense, she would try to please him and say, I'm so sorry, what can I do differently? And try to make him happy, whatever. And then that didn't work. And he would still be upset. And then she would get frustrated and say, I don't know why you're so mad, whatever. And she'd come back at him. And then they would just go toe to toe and argue, right? Because now they were going at it. What happened instead was she started just working on her own experience. She would do whatever she was doing. He would have his blow up or upset and do whatever he was doing. And she'd be like, wow, I can see you're really upset about this. I'm going to go do what I need to do. I'll see you when you're in a better mood. And she would walk out of the room. He didn't have anything to do with that energy. There was nowhere for it to go. So when you've got a runaway freight train, even a runaway train, you still need to be stoking it with coal. Eventually, the train's going to stop if you don't keep putting in fuel. So the biggest thing in a toxic situation of any kind is look at yourself and say, what's the best version of me that I can be in this situation? Most of the time when people start doing that work on themselves, they find that the situation actually isn't as bad as they thought it was. They may still decide they want to make a change, but they're going to do it coming from a place of feeling empowered, feeling strong, where it's actually a choice versus where they're trying to run away from something, versus where they're trying to escape something, versus where they're being a victim or they're blaming somebody for their experience. Then it becomes a choice. One of the things Tony Robbins always says, one of the things you asked us, what's the reason people don't change? Fear, right? But it's also the reason people do make change many times is out of fear, right? Any decision made from fear is not a good decision. We want to make decisions coming from strength and coming from power. So what I always say, toxic relationship, toxic work environment, toxic whatever, focus on being your best version of you. When you're in a place, because I've never had a person who, when we really dived into it, where they really could say with their hand on their heart, they were showing up as the best version of who they are. And inevitably, when they make the change, things start to shift, and they don't bother them as much, and they make a plan to do something different, but they're choosing it. They're not reacting.
Love that. And besides fear, and I'm glad you touched on that, the other thing that was kind of commonly posted was the unknown. So what can we do to become more comfortable with the unknown? Because I know for me, it's like sometimes it's just not being sure of what is on the other side. And it's not necessarily fear. It's just kind of like I don't know if I want change because I don't know if that change is going to be good or bad, right? So how do we get comfortable with the unknown?
So what you said earlier was really right. All of our change is on this side of a decision, right? It's always our fear is on this side of decision. One of the reasons Tony Robbins, when he first started doing the fire walk, is because if you could be as afraid of something that's as real as hot coals until still take a step, you could be afraid of something that's imagined or something that is a hypothesized thing that could happen to you and still take action, right? The fear is always on this side. Once we take the step, it's always better, right? We always are starting to move forward. The challenge that most of us have is, I'll back up for a second. So many of you guys are familiar with Maslow's 6 human needs, right? So Tony Robbins adapted Maslow's 6 human needs and made them a little bit more user-friendly. So I'll run them through really fast because this will address what we're talking about. So 6 human needs. The first human need is the need for love and connection. The second of the 6 human needs is the need for certainty or security. The third is the need for uncertainty or variety, which is why we get bored, right? The fourth is the need for significance, to feel like we're important, that we count. The fifth is the need for contribution, and the sixth is the need for growth. We all need to get all 6 of our human needs met, right? The challenge is we have different vehicles that we find that meet our human needs. Some of them meet our needs in a really healthy way, and some of them not in a healthy way. And some things meet some of our needs and not others. So I might have a job where I'm on a team and I feel really great about my coworkers and I feel total connection. I'm good at my job. I know what I'm doing every day, so I have certainty. But maybe it's the same thing every day and I'm bored. And because I'm doing the same thing every day, it also feels insignificant. So I might be getting my need for connection and certainty met at a high level, but I may not be getting my other needs being met at a high level. So I go back to what I said earlier, which is it's always between you and you. We look for certainty, we look for security in things outside ourselves. And one of the things that's really important to remember is the only thing in life that you have control over is you. The only thing in the world we have control over is how we show up and how we handle what's in front of us. So what we need to develop is certainty in ourselves and certainty in our ability to handle what shows up. We're never going to have certainty about what's on the other side. We're never going to know for sure, but what we can develop confidence in is our ability to handle what shows up. What we can develop confidence in is our ability to connect with people and build relationships. What we can build confidence in is our ability to pivot and be resilient. That's how you create certainty. Then clarity of vision, right? Knowing what you really want your life to be about and having the certainty of taking steps towards that vision. If we take the wrong step, is it over? Do we give up? Is it like, I want to lose weight, but I don't want to run? No, of course not. We just find another way to go. It's like being at the bottom of the mountain and looking up at the hill. So it's very important, but we're recognizing trying to find certainty or definite answers about the unknown is never going to happen, right? It's all a crapshoot. The thing you want to develop certainty in is your ability to handle what shows up. That's really where the power lies. That's really where resiliency lies. I always tell the story. So I was widowed. I mentioned this when we first started, when my son was 2.5 years old. And then my mom died, and then I lost all my money. I had like one thing after another. So if I had been a depressed person, or I'd had a hard time and I was struggling, people would totally get that, right? They'd be like, oh my gosh, look at Joelle, look what she's been through. She's had to go through so many things. It's so hard. Oh my gosh. I'd be very justified. People would get it, right? But what would it give me? It would give me nothing, right? I wouldn't get satisfaction or joy or love. I might get some sympathy, but I'm not going to get fulfillment. The important thing to remember is, again, the fulfillment doesn't come from what's on the other side. The fulfillment comes from taking the step. And that's where you can get your certainty. I'm going to take the step. I'm going to be a person that takes action. I'm going to be a person that finds a way to move forward. That's where you get your certainty from. I'll just tell you another quick metaphor. I have so many things I want to share with you guys. I have like all these notes. Another metaphor that I love about uncertainty is the invisible fence. So any of you guys that have had dogs where you've had to have an invisible fence collar, but the way the invisible fence works is you have a boundary where you don't want the dogs to go past, right? So they put the special collar on the dog, and over time they take the dog right up to the boundary. And when they get close to the boundary, the collar beeps. And when the collar beeps, they take the dog back. And they do that a few times. The dog gets used to it. Then what happens is they get close to the fence, the collar beeps, and they let the dog keep going, and the dog gets a shock, right? So the dog learns, uh-oh, when I hear the beep, I better turn around, because if I don't turn around, I keep going, I'm going to get the shock, right? But what the dog doesn't realize, if it kept going past the shock, what would it have? Freedom, right? Now, not that we would ever be as silly as a dog, right? But we forget that what's on the other side of the discomfort is freedom. What's on the other side of the discomfort of not understanding or knowing the unknown is a broader territory, right? So what we want to get our comfortableness with, I don't even know if that's a word, our comfort level with is moving past the shock, is getting comfortable with discomfort, of having certainty in knowing that you'll find a way to move past the beep. That's where we get our confidence. That's where we get our certainty from.
I love that. And for folks who are on either live stream or in the Zoom room, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. We'll probably be doing this after this question. So it seems like kind of attached to the fear, what a lot of people are afraid of is failure. So, there's the fear part, but then what do you do when you're so tied to not failing or perfectionism or whatnot? Like, how is that tied with pivoting, and how can we kind of mitigate that to be able to pivot, even though we might be a perfectionist or we might be afraid to fail? Like, those things kind of seem like they're interrelated in some ways.
So you probably won't like this, but one of the things Tony says is, as perfectionists, we think we have the highest standard, but perfectionists actually have the lowest standard because it's unattainable. So we're always off the hook. So just as an aside, something to think about, right, is, for most people, having a really, really high bar, it becomes part of our identity. It becomes how we meet our 6 human needs in some ways, right? We use it to get significance. We've raised the bar. We're a perfectionist. We've got this really high standard, right? And sometimes we use that to get connection because people appreciate it, respect it. We use it for certainty because we know if we do it, it's going to be done right. And so we use it for certainty. I don't know how much variety or whatever, it may not give us that, but it gives us those other things. Contribution, sure. Sometimes if we're helping other people to be successful, and growth, sure. If we're exploring and expanding new things and doing things, we get some of that. So a lot of times we wrap all that into our identity. The trick is to wrap other things into our identity too. I love Sarah Blakely. She talks about, I think you talked about this, Lana, in one of your podcasts, where she talks about how her father used to say to them every week at the dinner table, what did you fail at? Mm-hmm. Right? Really encouraging them to try new things. And I think part of what people want to incorporate is something into their identity that allows them to try new things. A lot of my venture capital guys use that expression all the time, move fast and break things, move fast and break things. So adding a little bit of that to our identity as part of who we are, I think is one of the ways to kind of be comfortable with it. But the biggest thing is failure is a narrative. Failure is a story. You can have, when I worked for Tony Robbins back in the day, a million years ago, I used to sell his mastery program. And I didn't sell his mastery program because I wanted to be in sales. And I didn't sell his mastery program because I needed the money. I sold his mastery program because I genuinely thought everyone on the planet should take the program because it was awesome and their life would be better. So I had a really, really high closing rate because I really cared. I remember I would chase people down the hallway and try to tell them why they should come because it was so great. I was so excited about the opportunity for people. And someone said to me once, boy, you must hear no all the time. People must just say no to you all the time. And I said, no, I really don't hear no very often. And I left the conversation. I thought about it and I was like, you know what? I do hear no a lot. I just don't process it that way because how I hear it is, oh, I haven't yet found a way to get them to see it in a way where they can hear it or to see it in a way where it has value for them. I never heard it as the no. So the big thing is failure is a narrative. Rejection is a narrative. You can say, wow, I tried, 10 things and none of them worked. I have terrible luck. Nothing ever works out for me. That can be a story. The other story is, wow, I tried 10 things. None of them worked. Look how fast I got through those 10 things that didn't work so I can get onto the 11th thing, which might be the right one. It's all about the narrative we tell ourselves. So I really encourage people. And the other thing I want to say is the pandemic, I've been saying for a year and a half to everybody and everything, do whatever you want. Blame it on COVID. Oh, you quit your job? Yes, it was COVID. Oh, you got a new job? Yes, it was COVID. You got married? Yes, it was COVID. You got a divorce? Yes, it was COVID. You gained weight? COVID. You lost weight? COVID. Whatever it is, it was the pandemic, right? Blame everything on the pandemic. This is one of those moments in time where we all get a free pass. And I genuinely mean that. Nobody is going to fault anybody at this particular time in our world for making changes. People have restructured their priorities. People have different things that matter to them. A lot of people, and this isn't a political comment, just a conversational comment, people are talking about like, why is it so hard to hire people right now? And there's one school of thought that says, oh, it's hard to hire people because they're getting extra pandemic assistance. But there's also this school of thought that it's hard to hire people because a lot of people don't want to do the jobs they used to do before. People are starting their own businesses. They're becoming gig workers. They're finding things that allow them to be home with their kids because they've had a year being home with their kids and they don't want to go back to their other job. So there is this very open opportunity right now to fail and have it be okay. I've had clients who left their company and have tried 3 things since the pandemic started. And the way that they framed it is they just called themselves an entrepreneur. And they just, instead of saying what their role is and what company with, they're just, I'm an investor, right? And that way that gives them the freedom to try things and no one's going to go, oh, well, what happened with that? So it's really about the story that we tell ourselves and the identity that we hold for ourselves. If we add to our identity, I'm an adventurer, I'm a risk taker, right? I'm a person that bounces back, I'm resilient. If you add those things to your identity and you think of times you really felt that way and you add that to your morning routine, it makes failure just seem like part of the journey. It can be exciting.
I love that. And so we're going to open it to Q&A right now. And Will, my good friend Will, you have if you want to kind of
Sure.
Unmute yourself.
Hey, man. Hey, Joe. I wrote it in the chat, but I suppose first of all, I love this session. And the dog with the collar, I wrote in the chat, I'm the old dog that ran past. I keep running and I've freed myself, right? So my question is, how do you take those of us who are super interested in pivoting and not turning that pivot into a tornado and spinning all over the place? Because you can well imagine you freed yourself. Now where do I go? Now what?
Unlimited choices.
Correct. So my question is, how do you give advice to those who have gone beyond that fence to pace themselves a little bit more?
Good question.
Great question. And first of all, I think that's super exciting that you've done that because, it's so exciting. I was laughing. I'm 54 years old and a friend of mine who's 70 something, I've done a lot of really cool stuff in my life and so is he. And I said to him, do you ever feel like all the cool stuff is behind you? Like you've met royalty and you've done all this stuff. And he said he's 70 something. He said, absolutely not. And I said, what do you mean? He said, I don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. The best thing that's ever happened to me might happen next year. I have no idea, right? So, there's a part of this notion that a lot of us in getting into our 40s, 50s, whatever, it's like we have a whole nother lifetime to live because we live a really long time now, right? So you do have all these choices. So, Will, the question I would have you really think about is, what do I want my life to be about? Not what do I want to do, but what do I want my life to be about? And it may be, I want my life to be about innovation and discovery. I want my life to be about being on a team that's like finding new things and breaking through. I want my life to be about impact. I want my life to be about fun and, whatever you want your life to be about. That's like the first thing I would get clear on. Then it's like, okay, talk about a little bit of our voila, what are the outcomes, right? But then the next thing is, what are my options? What are the things that you're considering, right? And then I'm going to teach you guys something. This is very cool. It's an acronym, and Tony Robbins says it rolls off your tongue. I disagree, but I'll tell it to you, and I think it's super helpful. It's called the decision-making model, okay? And the acronym is OOCEMR. It does not roll off your tongue. He is a crazy person, but it's a great model. So the first O is for outcome. That's what we're talking about right now with you. So what do you want your life to be about? That's the first O. The second O is options. What are the options that you're considering? And this is a great thing for everyone to think about. If you're thinking about pivoting, please remember this. If you take nothing else from this conversation, take two things. One, everything's between you and this. One choice is no choice. Two choices is a dilemma. Three choices, now you start to have some options, right? So the second O is options. So come up with at least three things that you're considering, right? The next part is the C. OOC, C is consequences. That's the pros and cons of each of the options, good and bad, right? What are the good things? What are the negatives with each option? But you can't do that unless you know what you want your life to be about. Right? If you say, I want my life to be about being part of a team that's explosive and dynamic, and then one of your options is to start your own business and be a coder, right? Or be an inventor, and you're going to be home, obviously you're going to have a challenge with that, right? But you got to first get clear. That's why people get upset, right? They end up unhappy is because they have a notion about what they want their life to be like. They get an opportunity offered to them. They don't have anything to measure it against. And then they make the decision based on arbitrary set of information that's coming in. This will prevent you from spinning around, like you said. So outcome, options, consequences, which is your pros and cons, good and bad. Then the first E is evaluate. The evaluate is, what are the chances, positive and negative, scale of 1 to 10, the positives are positives, the negatives are negatives. How positive are the positives, how negatives are negatives. So like if one of the options is being part of a team that's really fabulous, and that's one of your high values, and that's a definite, then that's a 10, right? But maybe one of your high values is autonomy, and in that environment, autonomy is a 2, right? So that's your evaluate. The M is where the magic happens. You ready? The M is mitigate. So once you've done your outcome, you've got your options, you've got your pros and cons, your consequences, you've evaluated them, then you mitigate. You say, okay, now that I've looked at this, I can see kind of which ones are going to meet more of my needs, which ones are meeting more of my outcome. But some of these things are still really appealing. Is there a way that I could make the bad things less bad and some of the things that aren't good enough better? That's the mitigate. Then when you've done that, then you can make a real decision. So as you're kind of looking at this, I know it's not very catchy, OOCEMR, but the process, what it does is it takes us out of something that we don't want to do, which we talk about in NLP called stacking and looping, where we just start circling with information. We have ideas, we talk about it, and we end up having the same conversation. I'm sure we all know people, not us, of course. I'm sure we all know people that do this, right? We have conversations, they bring, it could be their relationship issue, it could be their job, their boss, whatever, but it's the same thing over and over again. They seem to never get out of the cycle. This is how to get out of the cycle. Get it out of your head onto paper, but don't do anything until you're clear on what your outcome is, because otherwise you got nothing to figure out against anything. It'd be like if you watch football or soccer, right? Lan, I know your husband can relate to this. You watch a soccer game. Can you imagine watching a professional soccer game and you look up, there's no scoreboard, there's no time clock. You don't know where you are in the game. You don't know how much time you've got left. You don't know if you should be subbing out a player. You don't know where you are. So you've got to get clear on that, and then everything else can fall into alignment. And then if it's not working, Will, the cool thing is you just change your approach. You try an option. If that option doesn't work out, you change your approach, because it's not about the option, it's about the outcome.
And,
Fantastic. Thank you.
yeah, and Nithya wants to see if you can repeat what the R in the framework is again.
Oh, sorry. R is resolve. That's how you make your final decision. R is resolve. Sorry, I should have said that. OOCEMR. Outcome, options, consequences, evaluate, mitigate, resolve.
Awesome. Does anyone else have any kind of questions, or we're just going to kind of free flow this at the end? Anyone has in the audience have a question? No?
I know I dumped a lot on you guys. I
No,
tried
this is
Tony
amazing.
Robbins for a long time, and he can't talk for less than like 10 hours. So I need that example.
Well, tell me, okay, so I've known you for over a decade now, right? We met when we were 18, of course. So when I met you were a marketer. How did you transit? Okay, so you kind of worked with Tony.
Yes, talk about pivot.
Yeah, and then you went into marketing.
Yeah.
And then I know, I met you when you were at Chicken Soup for the Soul. You were the CMO. And then you pivoted again, and then you went back into coaching. Like, how was that pivot for you?
Yeah.
And how did you make that decision?
It's interesting. It comes back to what Will was talking about. I was at a point where I'd gotten past my comfort zone, and I was very open. But I really knew what I wanted my life to be about. And even when I went to Chicken Soup for the Soul, I went there not for the job. I went there for the company. I went there for what the company did. I wanted to be part of a company that had that kind of mission. Then, when that changed, I went to go do my own thing. I had been doing marketing for that company, and that was where my skill set was. And that's kind of where my contacts were. But I was always open, and I always tried to add value and still show up doing the best of who I was and adding value from my coaching background in everything I did, whether it was marketing, sales, whatever. And then the pandemic hit. And like so many people, it's interesting. I had done I'd done an event with Tony Robbins a couple of years ago in Santa Monica for the Family Office Association, because I was working with them with one of my clients for marketing. And after the event, Tony Robbins' son called me and said, "Hey, I don't know if any of you guys in the old crowd are still coaching, but Tony's got a VIP client, and he's wondering if any of you would work with her." And so 3 of us said we would, and none of us were coaching anymore. And we all talked to her, and she ended up choosing me. I wasn't looking to coach again. I wasn't getting back into coaching. It wasn't something that was on my radar. After about a month of working with her, the person who had first introduced her to Tony Robbins saw how different she was and called me. Since that time, I am so booked up that I brought in 2 of my other coaches that I used to work with at Robbins. I do no marketing anymore. I haven't done marketing since the pandemic started. And now this is my whole life. And I'm like happier than I've ever been. And I think what it really comes down to is giving yourself the freedom to follow what feels right to you, not to be stuck on what you think you should do or how you think you should do it. But again, like I was talking about, really being clear on what you want your life to be about. So yes, I've been doing marketing for a long time, and I fell into that. I fell into that because it felt right, and it seemed like the right thing to do for where I was at in my life at the time. But as many of us, as we've gotten older, my priorities have shifted. And before, where my priority may have been more to make a living to support my son, to be more in a consistent environment while he was growing up and all of that, my focus has changed. My value system has changed. Now my value of having impact and being more in my gifts is much more important to me than it was, 10 or 15 years ago. So that's, it's not just being really clear about what you want your life to be about. And the amazing thing that I find when people do that is incredible stuff shows up. If you would have told me 2 years ago that I'd be doing what I do now, I make twice as much money and work half as much time as I've ever worked in my life.
That is so funny you say, well, first I want to say one thing is that I've known you for a long time. And even when you were in marketing, you didn't shine like this. You literally glow. I mean, and
I love what I do.
No, but it's like, I can see that you are in your passion. And when I see you, I'm like, this is her calling. I never felt that when you were in marketing, and you were a good marketer. I'm not trying to say you weren't, you were a great marketer, but you just kind of felt like you were doing a role. This one is like you, and you could
totally
feel it. Do you know what I mean?
Thank you. I feel that. And I think that's part of the, the gift of again, resiliency and building emotional muscle is to be able to take those chances. And at the time when I did it, it was a big chance. I was giving up a salary. I was giving up a consistent income, just like when you started Community of Seven,
Yeah.
it's like, that's a big risk to take. But when you feel like you're in your gifts and you're really clear about what you want your life to be about, it's not about, like you said earlier, knowing the exact outcome and knowing the end result. It's just the next step. It's just taking the next step. And so many of us, you said something else interesting earlier. You said, we think we have to make these big decisions. It's not the big decisions that affect our lives. We didn't get fat because we made a big decision to eat one day, right? We get fat because we made lots of little bad decisions. Our marriages don't fall apart usually because one day something happened. Marriages fall apart because over time we don't put the energy and effort in, or we get into negative routines or whatever. So it's not the big decisions that really change our lives. It's the little tiny decisions every single day. Who am I calling back? Right? What if I had said, when Josh said, would you take a coaching client? What if I had said, oh, I'm too busy, I can't right now? My whole life would be different. So it's those little decisions along the way that really make the difference. But we put so much pressure on ourselves. But the cool thing is that the little decisions, we can make a new little decision tomorrow, today, right this minute. You said you like everybody to leave with, doing something from these calls. And one of the things I would say to everybody is, think about one thing that you've really been wanting to explore or do or investigate or get into, and take one action towards it, and just make the commitment to yourself that you're going to take one action a week towards it. It doesn't have to be big, just one thing. And I guarantee you, by doing one thing a week towards that result, you'll be amazed at how much momentum starts to get created. For most of us, we put things like, we'll be all focused on one thing, and then that's fine. And then we focus on something else. And then that's right. If we can put a little bit of effort into all the major things that matter to us, we start building emotional muscle. We start creating opportunity. We start creating opportunities and places to pivot. We start building an identity for ourselves that allows us to pivot. So we're not stuck in being, I'm a hedge fund manager, or I'm a mom, or I'm a doctor. Instead, we're something else, an evolving person that has a multitude of interests. Wouldn't it be cool to have your identity be, I'm a Renaissance person? That's a very different identity, right? Versus I'm a hedge fund manager. But it's just as freeing. Right? We get so locked into the way we think we need to think about ourselves and describe ourselves and the narrative we need to create and all of that. Again, I'm going to say to you guys, it's COVID. Make up a new story, right? It's not too late. We're not out of the pandemic completely yet. So you still have a little time. So whatever it is that you've been wanting to start, investigate, do, start it now, do it.
I love that. Love that. So during the last Let's Talk, as we kind of wrap up, we were talking about courage and fear, and the guest who came talked about one of her favorite quotes, and it was, "Jump and the net will appear." And the quote that I had was by Ray Bradbury, which is, jump off the cliff and build your wings on the way down. And I'm really kind of what you're saying throughout this whole conversation really resonates. And it's just about kind of believing in yourself, trusting in the universe, and making sure that you build the muscle, the emotional, the mental skill set before that pivot. So it's not just about jumping, it's about prepping yourself beforehand, which is probably the important part.
If you jump on a broken leg, you're still going to fall down, right?
Good point. So
you got to build the muscle before you jump. I mean, part of it is like, we put such unrealistic expectations on ourselves. And it's like, a lot of people, in our culture right now, a lot of people take medication right now. People come to me and they go, I want to get off my medication. I'm like, why? Like, let's first get you strong. Like, you've got a broken leg. You're like, I want to take my cast off. I'm like, hold on a second. Like, let your leg heal and then we'll take your cast off, right? We're so hard on ourselves. We put such unrealistic expectations. And the big thing is just take the next step and give yourself a little grace.
Yeah, I love that. So guys, if you can kind of put yourself in gallery mode, you already know the deal. Also in the comments, I put Joelle's website and also her LinkedIn profile as well. So add her and then go to her website. How else, any way else we can support you, Joelle?
No, if anybody is interested in coaching, right now my book is full, but I work with two amazing people also from Robin's background, both like amazing, incredible people, totally different backgrounds, a guy and a girl. Brooks is amazing. He's self-made investor, has done a ton of leadership training for Landmark Education. If any of you guys are familiar with Landmark or the Landmark Forum, as well as all his Tony stuff. Emily's got her PhD in psychology. She's amazing too. We're all very kick butt. So if anybody needs anything, we'll kick your butt happily. So call us. And I love being here with you guys. Any way I can be of assistance, I'm happy to. So reach out.
Awesome. And so guys, if you can put yourself in gallery mode and turn on your cameras if you can, because I think Joelle deserves unmute yourself. Huge round of applause for Joelle.
Thank you.
Thank you guys. I like that.
Love you, Joelle. Can't wait to see you again soon. Next time I'm in California.
Yes. Yeah. Anybody who's in California, come say hi to me. I'm in LA. If anyone's in LA, say hi. I also host a little Thursday night thing. Send me a message. I'll tell you about it.
Awesome. Bye-bye. Bye, guys. See you later.